have a very special guest today. Her name is Joanna Hardy. She is a world-renowned mindfulness teacher. She is an author of books that gear towards teaching mindfulness to adolescents. And she is also a social activist, which is very timely with what is going on in the world right now with the recent death of George Floyd and the worldwide protests. Joanna, welcome to the show. If you could unmute yourself, Joanna, if you hit the unmute button.
Here we go. Okay, unmuted. Thank you, Brian. I'm very happy to be here. I wish I could see all of who's here.
Well, we have two students live with us today. Can you tell us in some brief bullet points just a little bit about your background as a mindfulness teacher or what it is that you do?
Yeah. So, I mean, I came to the mindfulness practice through a lot of pain, through a lot of discomfort and not knowing how to be in my body and breaking a lot of rules and making my family unhappy. And, um, I found a time where I was just bumping up against too many walls. And I kept asking myself the question, like, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way. And finding mindfulness was what that better way was, right? Like I needed to find a way to slow down, check in, find out what and where my complications and issues were coming from. And it's easy to blame. It's easy to point the blame at society or family or, in all these directions, my parents and my friends and my schools. Um, but then ultimately, like my reactions and how I was behaving towards that blame was really my problem. And it was causing me more problems. Um, so how I came to the mindfulness practice was really like saying, you got to slow the fuck down am I allowed to say that? And check in and see where the common denominator is, and the common denominator was me, and how I was responding to definitely social injustice. So I don't want to say there is not social injustice because there is. But I have an opportunity to show up in a way that doesn't cause myself as much harm. Yeah.
So, can you walk us through a mindfulness practice? Because I think it's very timely for all of us now to just, as we said before, contact the ground and really just center ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. So, just checking in with where everybody is. I'm not sure where you're sitting, if you're on your bed, if you're on a chair, if you're in your living room, on a couch, if you're outside, if you're in the bathroom, wherever you are. It doesn't even matter, actually. We can be mindful anywhere. So, allowing yourself first to find your feet. Let's just settle into our feet, like find the ground. Find a place that feels solid and real, that exists. We're not looking for some like spiritual, mystical experience, but what's real right now? So let's just check into our feet. Maybe you're wearing shoes or you're not, but feeling the pressure of your feet touching the ground, touching the floor. Maybe it's touching the earth. And seeing if we can let all attention land just in that space. You don't need to think about it. Even if you think it feels weird or strange, it's okay. Just let your feet feel real. These feet belong to you. They're what root you to the ground. They're what help you walk and stand. So holding those feet, feeling those feet. And as the mind drifts off, that's okay. Let the mind drift off. Totally normal. And then see if you can just like ask it to redirect itself back to the feet, just for now, just for a few minutes. And then we'll move up the calves, the ankles, the knees, the thighs, just feeling the whole of the legs. These are my legs. Just checking in. This is my body. These are my legs, my feet, my calves, my shins, my knees, my thighs. I own these. I live in these. And then moving up into your pelvic area, your belly, especially your lower belly, feeling how much tension you might hold. And let your belly actually breathe and soften and expand as much as possible. See if we can soften the belly where we hold so much tension, the lower back, the upper belly. And again, just knowing this body, there doesn't have to be anything spiritual or existential about it. All we're doing is experiencing being and feeling this body that we live in. So letting the belly grow as big as it wants to or needs to for each breath and contract as it does. Feeling that move into the upper chest, the upper back area, the rib cage. This is where the breath happens. And we know this breath so well when we hear statements like, I can't breathe. So, really feeling the ability to breathe. Right now, I can breathe. I can breathe. So, let yourself breathe. Let the chest grow, the belly grow. Just taking it in, taking in this life force. And then moving up into the heart area, the shoulders, the arms, the upper arms, moving through your elbows and forceps, wrists and hands. The breath does not end in the lungs. The breath expands through the whole body. So just letting that happen. And you don't need to make it happen, it just happens. Breathing happens. So allowing yourself to rest in that wisdom. My body breathes. And then moving up into the neck, front, the back of the neck, the chin, the jaw, how much tightness we can hold in those areas. Feeling your cheeks and your eyes, your eyebrows, the back of your head. Just taking it all in. Like, you don't need to make a bunch out of it, but just like experiencing this body that we live in. Your forehead, the top of your head. And noticing how if we didn't have this breath, none of this would exist. This breath is what allows all of it to exist. And then seeing if you're going to hold your whole body, this whole body, from the tips of your toes to the top of the head, breathing, living, feeling, sensing, vibrating. And then whenever you feel ready, just very slowly opening your eyes. There's no rush, but open your eyes and see what it looks like to see what's in front of you. Where are you right now? Taking it in, experiencing it. And also seeing if while we do that, we can stay present in our toes and in this breathing. And this experience of the whole body.
Thank you for that. That was very grounding for me. It's exactly what I needed today. And what you said was very poignant about the importance of the breath. And I think that that's part of the just unbelievable outrage that the whole world was able to see someone denied their breath in
That's
real
right.
time for almost 9 minutes. It's inconceivable. I mean, we take the breath for granted. When we meditate, we kind of watch it. And to see someone have their breath forcibly denied in front of us is just shocking. So what we did was poll the kids to get a sense of like what they're feeling. Normally, we just do a couple different measures, but there's a lot here. So I want to kind of share it all with you to share the ground that we're speaking to.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
So we asked the students, what is your level of anger at this point during the corona crisis? Because we've been checking in each week. So at this moment in time, 27.8% said it's about the same as before corona. 11% said they're less angry than before. 40% said my anger is worse than it was before corona. 22.2% said I'm starting to rage. 22.2. What is your personal experience of racism? 66.7% said I feel that I have been the target of racism at least once in my life. 11.1% I feel that I am regularly the target of racism. And 22% say I do not feel that I've been the target of racism. And then when they project out into the future, we ask them, do you feel that you will be treated in society the same as anyone else based on your race or identity? 58.8% said no. 29.4% said not sure. And 12% said yes. Only 12%. Do you trust the police? 55.6% no. 44.4% I'm not sure. 0% said yes. What strategies are you using to calm down when you're angry? So this is where we tap into the pool of wisdom with the kids, which has been the learning experience of me to see how much they actually have to teach us.
Mhm.
Here's some samples. Writing, listening to music, talk to my close friend, cleaning my room. I write down what is going on in my head in notes on my phone and lock them so only I can read them. Taking a walk to the park, distracting myself with videos or movies, deep breaths. I get off social media for a while, but still keep myself informed because I feel I need to. So this is, although you can't see all the students' faces right now, this is the flavor of what's going on right now. You will see the faces of two of their representatives shortly. So a lot of students ask the question, you talk about mindfulness, and what good could mindfulness or meditation do at a time like this when the world quite literally is on fire in many places, very close to home, to us, especially in New York City. And you're coming to us from the West Coast, is that right?
Los Angeles, yeah.
LA. So have you been experiencing, you have a lot of the same themes out there?
Oh yeah, and I live in a family. I live in a Black family, so we're feeling it deeply.
So one of the questions that has come up, it came up with Gina Sharp, teacher, with Leslie Booker, was there's a lot of times people think mindfulness can't help them, and they also think that it's kind of a white thing. So you're a mindfulness teacher. What wisdom do you have to offer to us in this time of pain right now? How can mindfulness help us right now?
Yeah, I mean, well, just to be honest, I think it's kind of a white thing too. It's been very westernized, this terminology of mindfulness, especially secular mindfulness. And so, okay, so I'm gonna just talk truth about where this practice works for me. One is I need to know first what's real for me. Like, what's real? Is my fear real? Is my anger real? Is my sadness real? Is my grief real? Do I own this? Do I know this? Or am I just picking it up from social media or other people's perspectives, or, just like watching what's going on outside of me? Or is this, do I own this? Is this mine? Right? So what mindfulness helps me do is go, oh no, I'm fucking pissed. Again, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I'm cussing. I'm not sure if I can do that on this show. But I'm upset. I'm angry, right? So I'm ranging between. So what mindfulness has done for me has allowed me to check into what's going on. And so part of what's going on for me is a deep sorrow and grief. And then another part of me is really activated and needs to have action, right? And so what I'm learning to do, and what I've learned to do through mindfulness over the last 20 years, is what is my precise, wise, and like prolific anger? Like what's useful? Like what can I do that is actually going to make sense? And before mindfulness, I found a lot of like, I would talk all kinds of crazy talk, and I would just like speak from a place of reaction. When I found mindfulness, my reaction was much wiser and people could hear me more clearly. Right. So I had something to say that made more sense, for one, because as we all know, like when we're talking, when we're pissed, it just can be super like crazy. But when we're talking from a place that has some groundedness, some clarity, more people can hear us. And so at this point in my activism and in my response to what's going on in the world, can have clarity, can have a lot more clarity, and a lot more people can hear me.
So you were mentioning reacting and responding. So one of the benefits of clear seeing when you're mindful is that you get to choose either a response, which is different from just impulsively reacting to something, because you may not have thought through the consequences of that. So when we look out into the world, we see it's kind of a confusing portrait, because we see protesting on the one hand, where people are speaking up because what they see is injustice and they want to speak to it. And then there's a certain element in it that's being violent, and it's doing all sorts of behaviors, looting and all of this. So that seems to be like responding versus reacting. When you look out at the landscape, do you see it kind of the same way? like in yourself, you can respond or react versus how we're watching it play out in the world?
Yeah, I mean, to respond to what's happening as far as looting and all that is like such a longer sociological conversation. This looting doesn't come from nowhere. So it's not like people just want to have stuff. It comes from a deep sociological and long-term history of need, economic need, and all that.
But I mean, but do you think? I mean, there's certain elements in there that, and not 100% of there are some people who are just grabbing things because they want to grab them. I mean, there's some element of that happening.
right. There's some element of that happening, but is that not coming from? It's hard to not look at when I look at the mindfulness practice and what we're talking about is there's a lot of causes and conditions that
Right.
come from it, and so we have to look at the historical causes and conditions. And the historic elements are, we've been in a lot of economical need for a long time, some Black and brown bodies, and so there's that experience of I'm owed this, right? I'm owed this. Anyway, we can talk about looting of these brown bodies and how these brown bodies have earned money for the places that they're looting for eons. So it's like an interesting, long-term prospect. But where do we place, like right now, immediately? How do we place our anger? How do we place our rage? How do we place the injustice? Coming home first. And when I say coming home, I mean coming home to this elemental body, coming home maybe to our ancestors, coming home to what we know to be true, which is we all, I think, have the basic premise of not wanting to cause harm, right? Like we all come from that place of kindness just feels better. It just does. And so when we come from that place, when we settle there and then move from that place, um, how do we behave and move through the world? And unfortunately, you've asked on somebody who considers himself an activist and maybe not always a peaceful activist. Sometimes action looks like something that looks like um, not being proper or not being well behaved or not being, there's these ways that society lays labels on how we're supposed to show up, and especially for Black and brown bodies. Um, so, I ask into whoever's listening, like, how are you feeling about this? Are you feeling like you're popping off just because, it feels good and it's fun and that's what everyone else is doing and this is, or are we popping off because, I've deeply checked out what's going on for me, and I know where it's coming from.
So that's where the mindfulness comes in, right? To know exactly what's happening inside this body. Because if you don't know the thoughts and the emotions inside your mind, and you don't know what's going through your veins right now, you're likely to take action that it doesn't reflect your deepest values.
Right.
Correct?
Right. And that's where mob culture comes from. That's where mob culture comes from. That's where like peers and trending and all that comes from. And it's really possible, especially as young people, to get lost in that. And I know it's like it's so going against the stream to check into what's real for you versus moving forward on what's popular. Um, and not even for young people, for older people too. But it's just like it's such a good question. Like, what's mine, and then what am I doing because everyone else is doing it?
So what I'd like to do is I'd like to bring on Jalissa. Jalissa is a senior. And as you know, I know you have your own kids, and this is a very peculiar time of life right now where 12th grade seniors who've done everything they've been told to do since kindergarten now have to transition into the world without like a physical graduation ceremony, any, rite of passage. So what Jalissa has done on her own has to initiate a conversation about what's happening in the world right now. And she had 2 nights ago, she organized it where it was just a very, very real conversation amongst the student body. So she's taken that leadership position on, and I know she has some questions for you right now. So Jalissa, go for it.
Thank you. Some of the questions that I did have you answered while you were speaking, so I'm going to go to the ones that you haven't got to. Are there certain mindfulness techniques that you use when you get frustrated?
So, Jalissa, I mean, that's such a good question. For me, like if I didn't have a belly, I'd be in trouble, right? So it's like if I only had my fists or my head, I'd be in big trouble because I'd always be fighting. I was just a fighter in school, right? So my belly for me is a really important place. And when I say my belly, I just mean like I need to take a breath. Like I really do. And I know that that seems so like lame and menial. But I have something called, the soft belly meditation. And I know we're all into hard bellies right now, but like, fuck that. I'm all about my belly being soft. I don't.
Joanna, if we could just limit the F-bombs, it is for high school. So,
okay, so
we're at 3 at this point.
Screw that. Forget that. Forget the hard belly. It's like my belly. I mean, even right now, Jalissa, I don't know how you're feeling, but just like if we checked in together and if you let your belly soften and if you let it expand as much as it needs to, and if you let it grow as much as it needs to, and I just mean like let that belly move,
Right.
And I mean it's almost like magic. Like it's almost like magic. It stopped me from causing a lot of harm, actually. It's caused me from certain conversations or it never stops me from cussing because that's just part of my vernacular. But it's just like, like when I breathe, and if we could do this together for a minute, I let my belly soften. It just really does something different, And it helps me slow down. It helps me stop. It helps me check into my own body. And I know this is extreme, but I almost feel like from this space, I can do anything. Like from this space, I could do anything. I could be in any conversation. I could be in any kind of pain or hurt or sadness or sorrow, and this is not to say that it makes that go away, but what it does is it helps me acknowledge and manage and pay attention to it in a different way. So this soft belly for me is everything. It's everything. And the one beautiful thing about it is no one can take it away from me.
Right.
No one can take it away from me. So no matter who I'm up against, who I'm in conversation with, like my belly is mine. And so I can breathe and soften.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So Jalissa, I want to ask you, you led this conversation with the students, right? And you had some really hard-hitting questions, and it was very real and very raw and honest. What did you learn from talking to your classmates about what's going on in the world, about people's feelings, about what's your walk-away points from this? What did you learn?
That, like us being young doesn't take away from us understanding what's going on, and that it made me understand that I'm not the only one, because sometimes it can feel like being on social media and seeing a lot of different point of views, you feel like, are you the only one who sees what's going on? Like, are you the only one who understands the depth of what this is and what keeps occurring? And it felt good to know that there are other students from food and finance, other alums who are in the same age range who, understand where I'm coming from, who feel same pain that I feel when we turn on the TV and see things like, police brutality against um, other Black people and things like that. So it definitely took that away. And it strengthened the conversation that young adults and the youth, we understand what's going on, and we're going to speak up about what we see. We're going to take action. We're going to be proactive. We're not just going to ignore it, and we're not going to let it keep happening.
So what do you think the future, what do you think the future looks like? I mean, you're ready to head out into the world to graduate very soon. I mean, what's your forecast as a young person? I mean, you're going to move on and go on with your life. How do you think things change moving forward? How's the world going to change? What do you see ahead?
I think more young adults and youth are going to be proactive and still going to be a part of the conversation. I don't think that is something that's going to be handled in like, say, a month or 2 months. I think it's a long game that we have to continuously speak on, continuously be a part of. Graduating and going to college, I won't have as much free time as quarantine has allotted me, but I know that I will speak up on matters and will make time to continuously speak on matters and make sure that the conversation is still being had until we feel like, we're accepted by other, just the government and outside, because one of the questions that I did ask on the live is, have you ever experienced racism, and what did that look like? How did that take form against you, And that's definitely something that I want to be limited. I want to be able to ask a Black friend if they've experienced racism and hear no. I want to be able to ask the next generation if they've experienced racism and hear no. So that's what the future definitely looks like for me, and I'm going to keep working for that.
Do you think that this is going to change like what you do with your life, your career choice, anything like that? Do you think it'll have any kind of impact on that? Like what you're looking for now?
One thing that I told my sister is that I've always felt like activism could be for me, and I've always thought about it because I'm going to school for baking and pastry, so I've always thought like, I wonder if I'm going down the wrong career path or something like that. And I definitely told my sister that tapping into this has definitely let me know that this is something that I could not do full time. It is very draining. Since last week, I've been getting up from 8, 9 in the morning on my phone, different social media platforms, just doing things, getting things done till like 12 o'clock at night. And it is something that it takes a lot of work, and it is something that sometimes you start to think like, are you really being impactful? Are you really getting anything done? Do people really hear you? Are you being heard, And I've come to realize that I am being heard. A lot of people have reached out, emailed me, DM'd me, texted me, let me know that they hear me, that they appreciate what I'm doing, and that they need people to be more vocal and do what I'm doing. So, definitely I'm going to keep doing it. I just know that I can't do it full time. I cannot be like the main one-way career path.
So, Joanna, as you hear this, I mean, a lot of social activists, or some anyway, take to mindfulness for exactly the reason that Jalissa is saying, right? Because they get burned out by this work. Is that part of what brought you into it?
Yeah. Well, part of what brought me into it was like my own personal pain. But Jalissa, when I hear you speak, which is so beautiful, like I love that you're going into baking and pastry art, because when I look at that and the soulfulness of it and the difference between racism and race, right? And when we look at what race and our ancestry brought to cooking, just like to pull it down to cooking. I know you're doing something that's more specialized, but it's so beautiful to be able to so what mindfulness for me has helped me do is to help me clarify, a lot of clarification. Like, yeah, you're a Black woman who's going to do a craft, an artistry that your ancestors thought of as something that shared where they came from.
Right.
It was a way of sharing their art. And so mindfulness, I mean, I don't know if I want to call it mindfulness or something else, but for me, mindfulness helped me clarify like what I was doing, why I was doing it, where it came from. And it helped me to not have to be so influenced and clouded by other experience. And there's so much of a message in what you're doing, right? Like the beauty of pastry making and baking, like, has such a big message. And mindfulness helps us clarify that, I think, and it's so beautiful. And I respect it and I appreciate it. And I hope that you look at your ancestors for inspiration,
Thank you.
because they knew what they were doing. Promise you. Yeah.
And Jalyssa's good. She went very far in a competition we had this year for cooking and baking. Jalissa, I have to ask you a question. All this talk about mindfulness, and I just want to be real about it. I know that you took mindfulness a couple of years ago when you were younger, and you're in 10th grade. You didn't take to it so much. It wasn't like so much your thing. I mean, is it you still feel the same way about it? You're like, yeah, whatever, or are you a little more open to it now, or what's your position towards it?
Yes. I think that something that you did say in class is sometimes like you find yourself being mindful, and it doesn't have to be the whole like sit down and play the music in the background where it doesn't have to be like a ritual where sometimes you just find yourself doing it and it's not as so like coming to meetings and doing the whole group thing. I still feel like it's not really my thing. I just have like a hard time being still. Well, I understand that. Like, I find myself being mindful sometimes where you just like silence is something that I really enjoy, especially when I feel stressed out. Like, I'll be in a silent thing and I'll just like think or just clear my head. And I'm pretty sure that's mindfulness and just being mindful in a practice. So I think maybe it's more so that I like doing it alone rather than in a group.
Yeah. Yeah, and what Joanna was saying before about when you cook and you bake, a lot of times I know you get in the zone, right? When you sit
Yeah,
there and it's just you. I mean, you're being mindful. Like
it's
that's it.
very peaceful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. It's
Yeah.
beautiful. Well, and I don't know if you can hear me right now, but I think that there's a mistake or a misperceived notion that mindfulness means sitting on a cushion and being still and being quiet and lighting a candle. And like, in my mind, that's not what it is. Like, in my mind, mindfulness is social activism. It's baking, right? It's boxing. It's playing on the football field. It's writing a paper. It's, it's
Right.
whatever we are, our full and complete beingness. That's mindfulness. And so I have no doubt that when you are baking, I have no doubt, and I hope one day I get to taste what you make.
Definitely.
I hope I do. I have no doubt that what you're doing is mindfulness. Yeah,
Thank you.
no doubt.
So Maria is an 11th grader, and she asks, in a moment of panic when people are freaking out and yelling, how can we lead others to calm down during these times?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And, so much is like, I would ask Maria, and I wish I could see her, is her fear. Well, one is for her to check into herself, right? Like, what's going on for Maria right now? Is she afraid? Is her fear needing everyone else to stop right now? Is it appropriate what they're doing? Because sometimes, passiveness is not always what's most appropriate. So I would guess my question for Maria, since I can't talk to her, is like, what's going on for you right now? Like, what's going on for you when that's happening? Um, and then from that place, the appropriate response can come, right? So maybe it's asking friends to, hey, you guys, like, this isn't working. This is not what we need to be doing right now. Or maybe it's she needs to step back and let her friends or whoever's acting, or pro-acting to do what they need to do. So mindfulness isn't always about controlling a situation, but really checking into what feels appropriate, what's discerning, what's
Yeah, and again, the more clear we are, the more we can see where we're coming from. So maybe we want to impose a solution that
right,
doesn't necessarily need to be imposed because
right.
we're feeling uncomfortable with it.
That's
She
right.
also asked this question because you mentioned something before. You hinted at spirituality. She said, what is the difference between finding ourselves spiritually and just knowing we're present in the moment?
Mhm.
Is there a difference between those two things?
Mhm. Yeah. So again, another big question, and I really appreciate it. So finding ourselves present in a moment for me is like what I was asking for from Jalissa was, can you feel your feet? Can you feel your belly? Do you know where you are when you when you open your eyes? Can you see what you're looking at? That's presence, right? Where am I right now? Where am I right now? That's presence. And then maybe spirituality is an experience of letting go. It's an experience of a deeper release and um, mystery.
Hmm.
It's an experience of emptiness and faith. And you talked about faith at the very beginning, and I was hoping we were going to get more into that. But what the ideas of faith are.
Hmm.
Uh, so presence is knowing where we are right now, right now, right now. Where am I? And then spirituality might have a bigger, you know, that feeling we have when we really appreciate nature, or when we really appreciate love, or when we really appreciate our families, or when like it goes a little bit beyond just what we're experiencing right now.
So let's get into faith a little deeper now. I mean, this is not typically the topic that's talked about like in schools with like, religion and state, but people need to connect to something beyond themselves at this moment in time because people feel lost with what's going on. So what is your definition of faith? How can someone apply this regardless of what their religion may or may not be?
Yeah. Yeah, so from a mindfulness perspective, it's sort of like, so we all know what faith, like, when we have that immediate, like, oh, I have a big crush, right? Like, oh, I have a crush on that person, or I went to this concert and I'm like so blown out by like the music I heard, or like this immediate attraction, right? That is a certain kind of faith. That's like this bright faith. It's like this, yeah, I love this, right? This experience of really digging something and feeling like, I want to know more, I want to be in it, I want to experience that. That's one type of faith, right? And we've all been there. And then there's also the experience of faith where I've done something over and over again and I know deeply that this works.
Mm,
So, I'll use studying for a test for an example. I know that if I don't study for a test, I'm not going to do as well as when I study for a test. And when I study really well for a test, I have this faith. Like, I have this verified faith that I know what I'm doing. I can believe in it and I can trust in it, right? Or when we have friends that we tell a secret to, we have certain friends we tell a secret to, and you know for sure they're going to tell it to somebody else. We don't have faith in them. But when
mm.
we have friends that we can tell a secret to and you know they're going to hold it, that's a verified type of faith. And so when we look at a faith, um, in our inner being, like in our practices, is like, oh, interesting. When I sit still, when I'm quiet, when I pay attention to my body, when I check in, oh, this is interesting. Like I start to learn something that is really powerful. And that can be, we can call that maybe some kind of verified faith. When we just like leap off ledges and grab at things,
Mm.
uh, it's kind of like this more, as like I say, we call it bright faith, or like, it's just like, it's a crush. It's a crush. And a crush is different from love.
Right. So like someone who begins practicing mindfulness, they might read a book and they might get very inspired and say, oh my God, this can change my life. It's great. And that's like the bright faith you're talking about. But then they do it for a few weeks or a few months or a few years or a few decades, and they begin to see this clarity and this, things can develop. And that's more of the verified faith. Also, you might call it confidence.
Confidence.
Right?
We can call it confidence. And that does not mean it's easy. Like that does not mean that it takes away all pain, or
Right.
it doesn't, it's not Santa Claus. It's not like I'm going to write my list to Santa and I hope that he brings it under the Christmas tree. It's not that. It's very much like, oh, interesting. If I work for something, if I, it's like somebody that goes to the gym. If they go once, this happens. If they go a lot, that happens. So if I eat Cheetos and Coke every day, this is how my body feels. If I eat a little more healthy, this is how my body feels. It's like, it's pretty simple. It's weird how simple it is, yet we don't always prescribe to it. We don't always take that leap. Yeah.
And it's really helpful for you to point out that pitfall that people walk into mindfulness. There's some sort of message in the media I think people get where if you start meditating or you practice mindfulness, as Jalissa says, it doesn't have to be formal meditation like in a room. It could be just like walking, down the park. That we're not going to have these magical benefits necessarily. We might feel anger and fear and outrage, and it doesn't mean it's going to go away. But it means that we can navigate our way through it with a little more confidence, a little more clarity. Correct?
Right. And what I always like to point out to people is I always feel really happy when people start to feel the uncomfortable aspects
Right.
of mindfulness, because, we have the option of like chasing after joy and happiness all the time, or numbness, so you have the option of being numb. Like a lot of people have that option, or we can, feel some stuff. We can feel loneliness, we can feel sadness, we can feel grief, and that's okay. And I'm sad sometimes that the American media and so much points us in the direction of thinking that we're supposed to always just feel good.
Right.
And that it kind of like, it doesn't allow us to feel fully human. And it's so beautiful to feel fully human, and it's hard and it's beautiful. Yeah.
I'm the dean of the school. So like anytime anything happens, you said you were a fighter, earlier in your life. I might have been too at one point. And I know when things blow up in the school, I'm in it. Like I get called right into it.
Yeah.
So your emotions are being triggered left and right. And invariably, and I'll put a shout out in here, there's a kid in the school, Alec Anthony, will troll me and walk behind me and say, Simmons, are you mindful? Like, because he sees a little irritation. It's like, that's not mindfulness. It doesn't mean you're not. You can be angry and mindful.
Absolutely. And that is the big misnomer that I want to point to. It's like mindfulness means being real.
Right.
It's like truth. It's real. It's truth. It is not this false, we call it a spiritual bypass. It's not a false nice. And a false, we can all call out a false nice. We know that it's not cute. Like I don't even want to be around it. I don't trust it, So it's this way that, maybe people don't like me, and that's okay. But I'm not ever, ever going to tell my friends a false truth.
Right.
Right. So, yeah, so there are times, and maybe again, I'm not supposed to say this, but I'm watching the riots, I'm watching certain things happen. And I feel like there's some really appropriate actions that are happening right now that are historically necessary and that are long overdue. And that does not make me unmindful. Um, Being mindful does not mean being, a stepping stone. So, but it does mean being clear. So it doesn't mean I'm going to riot or break windows just because everybody else is, right? So that's a difference. It's not me following status quo just because that's what everyone else is doing. I don't need those shoes because everyone else has them. I don't. So mindfulness it's a deep ask, It's a deep ask, and it asks people to show up.
And it also doesn't mean that you can just be violent or break something because you're feeling angry, right? I mean, it's not like you're honoring your anger by going out and smashing someone else's window or harming someone who is correct. So I want to
Absolutely.
make sure I'm clear about what you're saying. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So what I'm saying is that we need to be clear.
Yeah.
Like in this moment, okay, I'm feeling angry. Does my anger need to say that I need to go hurt something? Right? Because unfortunately, that's historically what we're fighting against right now. That's what these that's what these, riots are about. Is historically people have felt like their anger allowed them to harm other bodies. And so that's not what we're asking to perpetuate. It's, can we check in? And this is where the sitting mindfulness practice helps. Like if we sit on a cushion and oh, I'm angry. Okay, I don't have to do anything about it. Oh, I'm angry. I don't have to react. I don't have to respond. Right? This is where we build a capability to be with, our emotions.
I just want to share something. We're learning live right now that that charges came in Minneapolis, and the 3 officers who watched this happen are now being charged with aiding and abetting murder. This is live right now. This has just happened.
Oh,
And the officer who committed the act, the charge is being upgraded to 2nd-degree murder, where it had been 3rd-degree murder.
thank you. Okay, this is good. I'm very happy to hear this. I'm very happy to hear this. So, so it's interesting, Brian, when we look at this, though, it's like, is this because of all the uprising? Would our democracy be looking at, I mean, I don't know, again, that's probably a conversation for another class, not your mindfulness class. But one thing I want to point to is mindfulness asks us to look at causes and conditions of everything.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It asks us, if I do this act, what is the repercussion? Like,
Right.
what comes from that? And so what we're seeing now in the judicial system, thankfully, as it should be, is that they're paying attention because basically, but they're being forced to. But it's like, what moves things along? What moves things along? What do I do that creates a response? And we know that, I don't know, I know we only have a few minutes, but
I want to have Jordan come into the conversation. I want to get his reaction to these news. Jordan, unmute yourself, and I know you have a question for Joanna, or if you want to give us your reaction to these news that the 3 officers are now being charged with aiding and abetting murder.
Okay, so I'll ask my question first. So I have a whole bunch of questions, but a good one is, how can you use meditation to build communities that show the truth on racism and inequality?
Well, Jordan, that's something that I've spent my whole career doing. I've been doing this for almost 20 years, and all I do is spend my time on. I think that's why I'm on this podcast, is because that's my history. I don't think we can look at, how can I say this in a very short amount of time? Mindfulness, again, is about causes and conditions. How did we get to where we are based on the previous actions, right? So the previous actions of this country, the previous actions of my life, the previous actions of your life are all going to place me. They are all going to socially locate me somewhere, right? Previous conditions. And so mindfulness shines a spotlight on where we've come from. We have to know our history. We cannot not know our history in mindfulness. We have to know our history. So if our history means your family history, your legacy, your parents, your grandparents, your ancestors, how you were placed in this country in the first place and beyond, that's part of mindfulness. And then because that influences your behavior right now. That influences how your mind thinks. It influences how your body moves. It influences how you eat. It influences all of it, right? And so that's a big ask. That's a big ask to say all of everything I've ever done or ever known, and all my ancestors and all my history influences and impacts this very moment that I'm living. And so mindfulness places all that in your lap right now. So hold that. You got that? Can you hold that?
Yes.
And it places all that in your lap and then says, okay, how can this mind and this heart hold that and move forward? And how can it move forward wisely? And how can it move forward with clarity? And how can it move forward without causing harm? Right? So it's a big deal. It's a big ask. And it's a really good question. It's an important question. But it's not a small question.
So we are running out of time. I would like to open it up to Jordan or Jalissa if there's anything else you'd like to say before we end, especially given the news that just broke moments ago. Anything you guys would like to tell Joanna or the world now that you're here? If not, that's fine. Jalissa, go for it.
I definitely agreed on some things that Joanna was mentioning when she talked about like lootings and where it's coming from. I think that being mindful, knowing exactly why you're doing what you're doing and not just hopping on a bandwagon, it makes more sense, and it makes the movement and what we're fighting for come more alive, rather than minimizing the movement because you're choosing to act in a way that doesn't reflect what the majority is for. So definitely wanted to say that and I think that we are getting garnering attention, and I think that the results that we got with the officers, because I did see that post too about how they got charged and everything. I think that came about because peaceful protesting, we've been doing it for years, and it's been happening for years, and nothing's really been getting done. And sometimes like more forceful action needs to happen for attention to be taken more seriously and things like that. And I think that some of the protests, they just are peaceful, and then not only like do we turn to maybe more forceful action because we're not being heard, but there's two sides. There's two sides outside and during these protests. There are the protesters, and then there are the police. And when people are antagonized, sometimes people are, sometimes being peaceful is not. It just feels like you're submitting, So
So
that's just what I wanted.
when you say forceful action, what do you mean? Because someone might be watching this and thinking, okay, you're giving a green light to someone to go out there and be violent. When you say forceful action, what is acceptable forceful action to you?
Okay. Rioting is a form of protest, you know? So maybe you're standing outside with a sign and also something else that I wanted to speak on, the looting and things. And you know, Joanna was talking about where that comes from and economics and things, you know. It does disrupt the flow, you know. Some of these companies they have enough money to build them back, but that's not the point. It's also that, you know, where are they getting their money from? Where are they directing that money, economics that they use, you know? So it's more disrupting that company. You get more attention. Many of these companies, they have been in the past been known to, you know, speak up on things that are racial, you know, um, just things like that. They're like, if I need to be specific, for example, Gucci, you know, they've been accused of using blackface. They've been accused of encouraging blackface in the past with their brand and things like that, or Moncler, the blackface monkey, that too, you know. So things like that, just we're serious this time, getting attention, like targeting companies that have been known to support the police despite you know, police brutality. And I'm not going to say that's all police, because yes, there are good cops. So just want to put that out there. But, you know, being mindful, there's a reason behind everything, and knowing why you're doing it and where it's stemming from.
And the police too, like everyone else out in there, are in incredibly stressful circumstances, where people are getting in their face, waiting for them to just react the wrong way. And I mean, they're part of what Joanna's saying is also the causes and conditions. They're people too. They're in the middle of a very heated situation, and they have to respond. This is not a situation that's good for anybody. It's worse for some. Absolutely. But this is a heated, difficult thing to untangle. And what Joanna was saying before, all of these pieces that have gone back historically, it's very complicated. It's very complicated.
I can understand that point, but I also believe that we're in times where police are taught to shoot first and ask questions later, whereas civilians are being forced to, you know, remain calm when they have guns pointed in their face, or remain calm when, you know, the people who are supposed to protect them are getting harsh and being aggressive. And
Now,
most
Jalissa, just to like clarify though, you think across the board, all police are being taught shoot first and ask questions later? There's some that do that, but this is a blanket statement about police in general, you think?
I think that there's a majority, and you know, you see so many situations where you might overhear. I think you just see so many situations where that seems like that is a dialect, and it just seems like a dialect that's going on, that it seems like it's being taught because of how many times it occurs.
And Brian, I want to point out too how the symptoms of fear arise whether you're around a nice cop, quote unquote, or not, right? So the symptoms of fear for Black bodies and maybe other bodies are there regardless of what their training might be. So this is the interesting thing, that if we're bringing it back to the mindfulness position, is, okay, in this moment, okay, I almost said it. I'm afraid because I got pulled over, and my mind's not thinking, oh, this might be a nice cop, right? Like my body, my nervous system, my whole system is in the experience of, this is scary, you know, and that's what the response is going to be in the body.
And I know that feeling, driving and seeing red, white, and blue, or hearing the cop sound, and your body tenses up because you don't know if you're going to be in a situation next, you know? And the difference is, I'm not armed. The cop is armed, and seeing how the people who are supposed to protect us have used that privilege, you know, to their advantage over and over. You know, it's a scary thing, and it's something that's real in this country.
Yeah, it's good.
Well, we're going to leave it here. This was a very, very interesting dialogue between all of you. And thank you to Jordan and Jalissa. Thank you for bringing your perspectives at this time. And Joanna, thank you for bringing your mindfulness, your experience, your wisdom into this. Is there anything you'd like to mention that we haven't discussed so far before we close?
Yeah, I love all your brown bodies out there. You know, like, I'm with you. Like, I am with you. Yeah, I have a lot of love and a lot of care, and I can only do so much, and I wish I could hold every one of you. And thank you for showing up. Thank you for being here. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, Joanna. In a way, you have held us during this time. Really appreciate you taking the time out to do this. So everyone out there, please heed what Joanna said, to really see inside the mind, the body. Try to take your own temperature down a little bit to see more clearly. Stay safe. And till next week, stay calm and connected. Take care.